How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you. Today, I'm joined by a former naval officer. He's competed in powerlifting all the way to Ironman, two very contrasting sports there. And he's also now the director of the Barbell Academy at Barbell Logic. Today, I'm joined by the one and only CJ Gotcher. How are you doing?
Well, ahoy. Yeah, I'm doing well. Life is good.
Good. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. How are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
So for me, I actually just got back from Florida for the Sandlot Jacks Fitness Festival, part of sort of Go Ruck, an organization that does like rucking and some endurance stuff with sandbag work. They were hosting this big event, so like a bunch of just different fitness challenges and things, kind of settling in from plane flights and dealing with our 2-year-old, who is an absolute joy in every way, and never challenging at all.
Oh, cool. And with the with everything else, obviously, having recently spoken with Matt Reynolds from Barbell Logic as well.
Yeah.
How's everything been going in terms of the online coaching side of things getting back up to normal in terms of seminars and coaching and all those sorts of things? How's everything been going on that side of things?
It's been exciting. I mean, for me on my end, so like I have online coaching clients. I'm working with my people, and I love the people that I work with, and a lot of my time right now is with the Barbell Academy. So working specifically with students, have a group of about 10 right now going through one course, but then most people going through the online course, kind of taking through, and that's just been a blast, honestly. Like I spent most of my early time in person, just with coworkers, fellow Navy, and then at a CrossFit gym, at different places. So the shift to online for me back in 2016-ish, or the start there, and then the full shift in it was right before COVID started, so like 2019, has really been a learning experience and kind of a blessing. It's been awesome, kind of walking that path through to today.
Has there been much big, because I know, especially with COVID, everything sort of burst online. There was, I know, for myself, being over in the UK, there was a lot of seminars and presentations that were either in the US or in Europe, when people couldn't get there for cost or whatever reason. A lot more content and everything was put more online. Do you how have you found the transition to online? Will it ever replace? I know this, I did warn you there may be a few tangents on this, but do you think it will ever replace, the in-person sort of classroom seminar presentation feel?
It's a great question. So in terms of my transition to online, because I started with Barbell Logic back in 2016, like I was a lot more familiar with it. And so, when everyone else like, scrambling with like, we have our systems, we've been doing this for a little bit. So that was nice. Eventually the market catches up. Like there are so many systems and system assistants who will help you develop your systems and things, that at this point, people are familiar with the concept. It's not so new. It's not so, staggering. In terms of, is it going to replace in person? I don't think it's even touched in person yet. In a particular sense, there's a saying, everything is in its early days, and I actually think that's true. Even the things that are we look at them as being old and tired, it in some ways are in their early days and how they interact with other things. And if online coaching ever was to displace in person somehow, I couldn't see it. The industry is moving so much, but people, gas prices increase. What do people do? Inevitably, they don't want to move as much. They stay close to their local community. That all these different factors, so much is changing. I couldn't see everything moving online.
Yeah. And as well, I think from what you've said there, especially with Barbell Logic already having those systems in place, and from your experience as well, having laid that foundation of working in person rather than being online, I think there was probably a case where COVID hit and everyone anyone and anybody could be an online coach or deliver everything on there, whereas you still need to have that skill set of being able to speak to people in person, and develop that rapport and relationship with clients, or students if you're mentoring people, or anything like that.
There, if I could, and
Yeah.
because you just inspired a thought, which is, we all see online. Like, online is the public square. I can hop on my internet and find Mike Tuchscherer, who is like last on your podcast, at least as of today recording. I can find any of the people on your podcast. They're great hosts. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I recognize these people. But there are so many, like, more than there are online, of in-person local coaches and groups who are just rocking it, who are dominating, who you will never hear about. There's this big news, that Elon Musk is buying Twitter, and I saw there was a financial report that by some standards, Twitter is the size of Olive Garden. Like, it dominates our attention, the online space, and all the things that are said, and the big debates in the fitness industry, and who said what about who. But so much is still happening in person.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the coaches I work with at the gym that I'm at. He runs sort of the athletic performance side of things, so works with a lot of team sport athletes. And in research papers or from seminars that he's been to and the education that he's done, a lot of coaches who have a very good reputation within their field but aren't big on social media, they don't have a really big following, because they're what's the phrase? They're sort of in the trenches, if you like, learning their skill and just doing their thing, but equally have a really good reputation. It just goes to show that maybe word of mouth or recommendations from other coaches can still be a big influence, rather than necessarily always having the biggest following or anything like that. I know from speaking with Matt Reynolds, it was a case of if you put an emphasis on quality service, everything else will fall in line from there, which I'm a big believer in. I think the quality of service that you offer and the standard level of professionalism that you provide can speak dividends for that from a client's point of view. I did a little bit of a brief introduction there, sort of the tip of the iceberg, if you like. For everyone listening who might not know your background, how you got involved with Barbell Logic, the variety of training that you've done in the past, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Sure. I came into fitness kind of sideways. It was a really weird way. So in high school, I was just physically active, fencing, taekwondo, like cross country, soccer, whatever I could, just because it was fun. It was something to do. And I got into college was probably my first time. I was at the Naval Academy. And my first exposure to coaching was helping other midshipmen who are failing the physical fitness test or prepping for like selection courses and things, prep for their course and pass their tests. Like, that was sort of my first exposure. But you're dealing with mids with all sorts of interests. Like, they come from all over the country, some all over the world. We had a lot of exchange midshipmen, and so like, what do you want to get better at? And so it was kind of a real learning, like, oh, okay, we got to be faster runners. We got to be stronger. We got to be, what does that look like? That was my first introduction to CrossFit. And then, like every good coach, who dedicates their entire life and career to it, I spent 7 years in the active duty Navy and didn't do anything professionally. No, so you graduate from the Naval Academy, you become a naval officer. So obviously I wasn't, a professional coach. I I was writing articles at the time because that's what you do in your spare time. I was helping, shipmates and our VBSS team. So Visa Board Search and Seizure, it's like maritime cops. And then eventually, as I started, off ramping out of the active duty Navy, I started getting certifications and started looking, keeping my eyes open. And then, left the active duty, went to back to California. And it's like, okay, I have these certifications and I have practice. I've worked with a lot of people on like an individual, but never and consistently. Never for like starting you from scratch and building you up into where you want to go as an athlete. That was never really the thing. It's a lot of like one-off sessions and platform time. So I'm like, how am I going to get hands on people that I can coach and help and get to know and learn? And in this local area, that's CrossFit. I mean, you see 100 people cycle through your gym, and if you volunteer for 8 classes and you got 10 people, 10 to 15 people a class, you're seeing 100 people a day doing a lot of movement.
Yeah.
So took up CrossFit, started working with Barbell Logic. So doing online coaching, I was seeing a lot of one-offs for strength, barbell strength. I was looking at your bio kind of, and it probably very similar to your market and your goal. So applying barbell strength, but often for people who are just generally looking for health and quality of life, but they know that strength is important. And then that's kind of how I got to where I am now. So like along the way, and incorporating and finding people who want the military training, obstacle course race training. I did a half Ironman at one point because I'm sure, why not? So like finding and incorporating these different influences into Becky, into John and what they're doing today. Yes. So that's kind of where I am now. Back in 2018, I started teaching at the Barbell Academy with Barbell Logic. And for us, a lot of it was our clients were like, we want to know more about coaching. And so that program developed until now. It's like an online learning. So you take it kind of at your own pace, but we have like the monthly calls and connections and things to just help people work towards whatever their next is. Because for some people, that's professional coaching. For a lot of people, that's not. And, A, that's cool. But B, like that's where I am as a coach right now.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And, you said, powerlifting, Ironman, CrossFit in there, quite a lot of varied things and especially when you mentioned there about qualifications, just learning, watching people move and, trying to get these different aspects because, I know when we talk about even strength training, there's loads of things that fall underneath, strength training, whether it be CrossFit, weightlifting, powerlifting, strongman, but then also, you encompass fitness underneath that. There's loads of other things from there. What was sort of two things sort of from the background that you've mentioned there? When did has strength training always been sort of like a constant through that, from the passing the midshipman tests, all the way through to CrossFit and all those sorts of things? Or was it a case of once you had, more time and could dedicate a little bit more time for it, strength training became more consistent with that through whatever training that you were doing? And then also, one of the first things that you said was, it was fun. Training was fun. Has that always been sort of a theme from there? Because it's one of those things where, and I'm sure we'll dive into this a little bit later, where people seem to want to identify as, well, I'm a powerlifter, I'm a CrossFitter, as opposed to exactly like what you said, which I thought was great. I mean, I'm not at that point yet where I think I would do an Ironman, but I did an Ironman. Yeah, okay, I did it. You can cross that off the list. So them two questions kind of make sense.
Yeah, I think the first one really leads well into the second. So like, has strength been consistent across the board? And hell no. Like I started, my background initially was cross country in high school and soccer, and I was like 150 pounds, soaking wet, and I could run for a really long time. It was great. I got into the Naval Academy and very quickly realized that sure, I could run an obstacle course, sure, I could run for speed, but put somebody on my back and tell me to carry them, and I was hopeless. And that, like, all of a sudden, that being hit in the face with all the physical qualities that you hadn't developed was like that set me up for CrossFit. And at the time, the gospel of CrossFit, that this will fill all your fitness gaps, that this would do everything you need, that kind of thing. So I was unfortunate. I was young. I was stupid. I was that guy who would like walk up, have you met our Lord and Savior CrossFit? Like, like trying to convert people off of bicep curls. It was bad. But like, it wasn't really dedicated strength training. It was just part of the WOD and learning the movements. So I was like, oh, I had a 3-plate deadlift. I'm really strong. Right. I was trying to earn a slot to attempt to become a Navy SEAL, to go to BUDS. I never did make that, essentially make the cut to get into the course as an officer. So there was a point, it was at that moment when the last door was shut. Timeline wise, it wasn't going to work. And I said, okay, I'm really tired of being the weakest fast guy in the room, or the strongest fast guy in the room, but still pretty weak. So I dedicated towards strength training. learning a lot about the barbell lift specifically. A Olympic weightlifter was running at our gym, Eric. He was awesome, and so he was kind of introducing me to the movements. And from then, again, the waves hit. So it was like CrossFit, yay, I'm an evangelist. Now I'm an evangelist for barbell strength. Everyone needs strength, and strength is what you need. Until kind of until I started working with people professionally for real. And there's that moment, there's that click where it's like, oh, maybe it's real for me right now, but that's not working for Joanne, who's 62 and is never going to go to a meet in her life. Like, that's just not going to be her thing. And she has different goals. And so kind of finally, I ended up making it back as professionally to CrossFit, but I sort of mellowed out, and meeting all these different people from different backgrounds sort of it sort of killed that idea in my head that there was an answer, that there was a 1-2 way. And then so strength became from there a consistent thread because it's important, a consistent thread because most people don't have enough of it. Like, just in general, in the population, if we look at aerobic activity and all the different things, I think probably the one that most people are uncomfortable with is progressive heavy strength training. But that's primarily just because the market's there. If we had a world of people who were familiar with the gym and blah blah blah, but nobody ever put on a pair of running shoes, I'd be a running coach, because that's what people would need to improve their fitness. Yeah. So yeah, that was in terms of like, is strength kind of a running thread? That's what I would say, is that it's become one because it's important, but less than it used to be, because back then I'm like, that is the answer.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that kind of two things from there, maybe from a probably both sides of that, from what you've mentioned, from your own experiences, but then as just being involved in training, but then also from a coach's point of view. From a client's point of view, have you found that you see a lot of people who come from a background of, a lot of people just get involved in running? I know, when it was lockdown in the UK, there was people who had coached who, didn't have access to a lot of strength training, and it was the other way around. They did running, and then other people who had never done any exercise before then found they were cooped up in their houses for months on end. What's the exercise that I can do? Well, I'm going to go running, because it's the first thing that people think of. Do you think that other people have gone through that same process, and then once they've found something that's barbell related or strength related, so because obviously as a beginner, as a novice, you're going to see great progress from whatever the first thing that you do is, and then you become attached to that, and it's got that glorified status of, wow, this worked for me. And then from a coach's point of view, do you think that takes time, like what you mentioned there about mellowed out a little bit in terms of realizing what different people need? Do you think that's just a journey and experience that coaches need to realize, and again, they go through that same cycle as well?
I definitely think that people go through cycles, that people, one of the first things we tell coaches as they're coming through is, you got to do this thing. Like, if you're not already a lifter and you want to becoming a lifting coach, why? Sure, you don't have to be an elite athlete to coach elite athletes technically, but if you're not, there's or you've never been in those communities, there's something missing on the table. And the same thing applies here. If you've never been through, to borrow the term, a journey of physical activity yourself, then you miss the cycles, you miss the wave. Like, when your client is super excited about, like you said, the novice gains that they're experiencing from whatever, it can get easy to get caught up in that wave and expect that to continue if you haven't been through 4 or 5 of those yourself, and you're like, I know what's coming. Like, it is, this is going to die off here. And part of that is the natural course of the novice effect. You to go back to what you were observing with the pandemic, people stepped out running. I think it's great, that people would get out and find whatever the first thing is: running, rucking, body weight stuff. The body weight fitness subreddit on Reddit just exploded when the pandemic hit, as people were looking for things to do. I think that's great. And as people find those initial novice gains, they get that excitement, they get that buildup. And then, but when those gains slow down, when progress slows, when it's not just a matter of do the templated workout and you will get faster, stronger, more capable, whatever. When that stops happening naturally, then that cycle is over. And either you're going to find a new cycle as a consistent athlete within that field, or you're going to find something else to be passionate about, something else to find fun, because progress is fun. And I, if I'm getting to your question or your thought, like that's really part of what we navigate as a field. Is it my cat? Is dealing with these waves of excitement, and when somebody hits that point, do we correctly navigate them through that to the next phase of development, or equally correctly, in my opinion, help them find the next thing for them? Because if somebody spends 6 months to a year getting stronger, and then they lose, excitement and strength, and they find CrossFit, they find obstacle course racing, I don't see that as a loss. They got stronger. Like, if honestly, how many people in the world will dedicate 6 months to a year to get strength, and to build that? So if they find that and then take a cycle in a different way, that's on them, and that may be more fun. That may help them be more consistent.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point, because I know when we talk about, strength, and we say a prime example is, I've been in the gym, right? We're going to do the powerlifting lifts, and I've kind of, even though it is squat, bench, and deadlift, it is in a powerlifting competition. It's kind of that, well, we're just going to use these exercises. You don't want to do a bench press because that it makes you feel as though you want to do a competition. Let's do an overhead press. Let's do a push press. And it's kind of, I think everyone has that thought process of, we've got to go to competition, because if it's something relatively new and they're making progress, then we don't want to then, if they do a competition, great. If they don't want to do a competition, what else do you want to do? And then just, pivoting and changing it around from there. And then equally, if they go and do something completely different, it's a little bit like, when you're talking about as like youth athletes, playing a variety of sports, can build, a bit more robustness and different movement patterns, rather than, specializing really early, which kind of goes on to, when we're talking about powerlifting and strength sports, everyone, you can type in powerlifter on Instagram and there'll be loads of profiles coming up just dedicated to powerlifting. And it's kind of, well, hear your thoughts on opinions on people wanting to identify with a certain sport, a certain aspect, yourself mentioning with CrossFit, that's for a lot of people listening, they were thinking, yeah, I know somebody who does CrossFit who was like, CrossFit is the best thing. And, for a lot of people, it is, and it's good. However, people forget that when you look at CrossFit, there's a variety of things incorporated with, within that. And equally, you can then change it around to do other things. And it's, not necessarily a bad thing that if you're a powerlifter, if you then go and do something else, it isn't the end of the world. So what are kind of your thoughts on the pros and cons of identifying as one lifter, if you like, or something different?
Yeah. I felt like there were 15, 20 things I could have drawn from that, because it's such a rich part of the worst parts of people's, training experience to me is this identity with a single activity. Because like it's this weird thing, I think, where in order to really buy in and commit, when somebody tries something new, I don't necessarily think, oh, they signed up for me, they're already super committed, they're done. Half the time they're wearing a coat. It's like they're putting on the coat to fit it and see if it fits them right. But in order to really give it a good try, in order to really know whether this is for me or not, they have to go in, like they have to do the thing. And then, so they start reading the books, they tell themselves the stories. For CrossFit, constantly varied functional movement done to high intensity, the 100 words to elite athleticism. Like they're going to learn like these phrases to give it an honest to God try, and really dig in. But then if you forget that you're trying, if you forget that you're experimenting to test, is this the right path for me right now? Then it can become a almost religious commitment, because those phrases and things are what gets you to the gym. They remind you, they are the drive, not the thing that you're looking to gain, not the progress, not the goals. uh that becomes a tough part. Like that can get into a trapping cycle where now the practice isn't serving you.
Yeah.
The practice is no longer moving you where you want to go, but you've weaved this story of how being stronger makes you a better person, makes you, harder, makes you north of like and this is not a diss to anyone who uses this term, but north of vag, like that's a term in the internet. You're a harder, like meaner man, because you can do this. And then after 5 years, 6 years, you're actually pretty darn strong. You're not, it's not really what you need anymore. It's not fitting into your life. Like, you've built a new social circle and they're doing things that you think are kind of fun or exciting, but you can't really participate in. And you start drudging training. You start resenting it a little bit. It's taking time from other things. But if you were to stop, you'd be a wuss. You'd be a weakling. You'd be, you're no longer that thing that you told yourself that powerlifting represented in your life, that because I'm strong, I am good, I am all these things. So like there's some deep personal stuff in the way we invest in our training. I think it's even worse in nutrition. Like in nutrition, people can get really deeply invested. And that would be the big con, in the pros and cons. There are pros. Like truly investing in something, investing in the terminology and the community, joining the CrossFit cult. If you buy the nanos and you do whatever, you do all the things, and you my warm up is your workout, all that kind of stuff. That those people tend to stay, and they tend to work out hard, and they tend to really get the value of training. And if that's a good match quality for their personality and who they are, then they may find a fitness experience that works for them for life. But if it doesn't, or if they change, because we change, right? Like that's a thing. If they change, then all of a sudden all those cons start to come in.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a good couple of points there. It's sometimes that things do progress through, and touching on the strength side of things. It was kind of, there was a lot of clients who had garage gyms who could still train and, loved it because there was nothing else they could do. But then all of a sudden it was a case of, from setting up the tripods to manage the lifts and just going up and down to then just looking up a little bit and being like, oh, I can actually go for a walk and do something a little bit different. Or it's a little bit like, especially after the lockdowns and when things started getting a lot easing, the restrictions eased a lot more in the UK. All of a sudden, bouldering and rock climbing was like just absolutely boomed. It seemed that everyone who was coming into the gym was like, "Oh, so what are you doing this weekend?" "Oh, I'm going climbing." Is that thing of there is a lot more to it, and all those things. It's a little bit like what you mentioned about, strength training was always there. It was just a case of, or it became always there, realizing that you do need to be strong, but it might change depending on where you're at. Sometimes you might want to do a competition, sometimes you might want to do other things, or take a step back from training. It doesn't have to be this sort of endless cycle where it becomes a chore or something negative. And I kind of want to touch on, especially when you mentioned about being, CrossFit, that was everything. How did you kind of pivot to then, especially when you mentioned realizing that that switch to think, oh, not everyone needs to train like this? And why do you think, or what's your thoughts on why do you think sometimes people struggle moving on from that first type of training that has enabled them to have success, and then when that starts slowing down, maybe look at something else and find that enjoyment again?
That's a really good question. The first, and it depends whether you're coming from the lifters or the coaches side, but the trends I think are kind of the same. The first thing that sticks people is that identity tie-in. When the frame You know, whatever you see as possible options are tied up within your frame. I think oftentimes someone who is really bought into a model, the model, whatever that may be, they don't even recognize the options outside of their frame because it's been so long. When there's a joke in powerlifting, you know, 8 reps is cardio. When 8 reps is cardio, what is a 5K? That's not even in your world. Like what do these people do? What? And so there's that. By the narrower you go, the more limited your frame is, and the more that becomes something other people do. I think to your first question of how people break out of it, and we see this all throughout the industry. You saw it in CrossFit in particular. I think is a useful visual for it because in the early days, you know, your Rob Wolfs, your Greg Everett's, a lot of people who became known as CrossFit's Olympic weightlifting person, CrossFit's nutrition guy. As you walk that narrative, that story for long enough, as a lifter or a coach, eventually it stops working. So as a lifter, for me, like CrossFit, I went through it and I would hear experienced coaches say, well, CrossFit works for a while and you'll get better at everything. And then you'll stop getting better at everything. And then you're going to try really hard and you're going to think the answer is to work harder and harder and harder. And eventually you hit a wall and you break. And I was like, oh, yes, they don't know, you know, they haven't been doing this as long as Greg Glassman has. And so I did exactly that. I got better at everything, got pretty darn good at a lot of things, right? And then when I stopped getting better, it's like, oh, I'm just not working hard enough. I need to do this WOD with more intention. I need to get more aggressive at it. Maybe I need to add more volume, you know, and then my shoulder starts blowing out. You know, my hips aren't working right. My back hurts. And for me, coming out of that was recognizing, okay, just like any novice to post-novice transition, I got to find something that works, because the goal was more important. I was lucky enough, although I was invested personally, the goal was a professional standard to try to become a Navy SEAL. So if my 500-meter swim time wasn't below 8 minutes, I was screwed. You know, like, and my 500-meter swim time was not below 8 minutes. So I needed an answer. And if CrossFit wasn't providing that answer for me, then I needed to figure something out.
Yeah.
So I think that would be part of it too, is what it's the getting out of the religious conviction for one, and then sticking to that external source, that source of ground truth. Because if what you're doing is working for ground truth, if it's getting you all your goals, why would you need to change?
Absolutely. I think from there as well, you know, especially when you were saying, you know, trying harder, you know, what was going through my mind is that I've had a lot of people, you know, come into the gym who have done something or have pushed something a little bit too far, trying to work a little bit harder. And then all of a sudden they've had to take a couple of steps back because they've got injuries, or not necessarily burnt out, but have maybe fallen out of love with training a little bit, and have taken a little bit of time away, and then I'm wanting to get back involved in it, and then struggle to realize, you know, what were they doing that for? You know, what is it that they were aiming to get? Obviously, you know, with your goal, you know, a Navy SEAL, there's times where you need to be able to hit in, whereas for a lot of people, you know, really, you know, for getting a couple more reps at, you know, X, Y, or Z, you know, is that really worth it? Or is it a case
what does it mean?
Yeah, which kind of goes on to the next part, which is, you know, that sort of health and life balance, or training and life balance. Because for a lot of people, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, there's that have worked and have coached with, you know, up to national standard lifters. You know, I've had other coaches that I've worked with that work with professional athletes, but for the majority, it's, you know, Bob who just lives down the road, who, you know, works 9 till 5 and wants to get stronger and has thoughts of going into a competition, or someone would like to enter their first, you know, CrossFit competition, or want to do the local competition at the gym. And with those side of things, especially sort of with yourself becoming, you know, more of the professional coach, how do you sort of put that across in terms of having that, health life balance or training life balance, from your experiences and from the people that you work with as well?
For me, it ties to what you said earlier. So, like listening there, you mentioned burnout. You said, well, maybe not burnout. You're just falling in love with training. And I'm like, it's almost burnout. Like you reach that point. If a lifter is reaching that point and they are not an athlete, something's wrong. That is just not it's not productive. If we were to run, I was running a little math on exercise and longevity. If we could prove that longevity or that exercising an hour a day, 5 days a week, would add 5 years onto your life, it's just not worth it. It literally, if you were to run the math, it's just not worth it if longevity was the only thing that matters because of all the time you're spending training. So if you resent the training, if it sucks, while you're doing it, if you're like not looking forward to it ever, then it's actually a negative in your life. It's an additional stressor. It's wrong to be training at that point. So we need to do something different, or we need to change up the volume of training something. Either there's an overreaching kind of response, or literally that style of training is no longer effective. And for me, that is the red flag. It's the canary in the coal mine. It's if I start hearing, today sucked, today sucked, today sucked in online, that's not like a, oh, well, he'll get through it out the other side. I did, because, in certain activities, because that was my choice and that was my sport, but this guy doesn't have a sport. So after 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, 3 months of hearing that sucked, why should I be surprised when he decides to do something else, stops working with me as a coach, and said, I'll be honest, you're a great coach. I like you, but the training sucked.
Yeah. Is that because especially when you talk about the training there's that from more so on the coaching side of you, there's I can't remember the exact phrase, but there's a program that you'll enjoy but won't get you close towards your goals. Or do you know the phrase? I'm trying to think. I don't know the actual phrase for it, but then there's a program that you won't enjoy but is absolutely dialed in to get you to where you want to be. And I know we mentioned this earlier on in the chat in terms of, well, I do CrossFit, so you're going to do CrossFit because I've had success with that. How do you think striking that balance is? Because especially there's, especially from assessments and everything that you would do in terms of working with a client, there's certain things that they might need, but then also it's a case of probably as a general population client, it's good to be quite a generalist, to be what can we put in. Obviously they can get more specific as time goes on, depending on what to do, but how much of that is a balance of what they want and what they need when it comes to training, if that makes sense?
So I'm taking a step to reflect on that one, because there's a lot to it. And the first is there's a judgment there. There's an inherent frame of, well, I'll give them a lot of what they need and a little bit of what they want, right? Enough to keep them going. That assumes that I know what they need. And that assumes, even if they have a targeted goal, like, oh, a lot of people come in and they state numbers. They're like, I want a 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, or a 2, 3, 4, 5 on the press, bench, squat, deadlift, for those numbers. Those are my goals. But if I dig in those a little bit, so, where do those come from? How would your life look like? How would you live different? How would you feel different if you were to actually hit those goals? There's nothing there. So even the assumption that, okay, they've given me these targets, therefore this is what I know they need to hit those targets. As a coach, a little bit of it is my responsibility I'm not going to say generalizing to all coaches, but in my practice, part of my job is to help elicit, what are your deep goals? What is your why? Why are you even here? And if there's no substance behind it, then sure, I can help you work towards that. But I'm not going to push into suck territory for you to hit goals that you actually don't care about, that you feel like you should hit, like they're shoulding all over themselves. Like I don't want to be a part of that. So that's where I always try to strike that line. Is like, wait a minute, is this something they really care about? Is this, there are athletes who they know they need to suffer and they're not really good at suffering. They have a lot of stressors in their life. they've got a lot of anxieties, they've got a lot of other things, and there's a little bit of the like, not masochist, but like a coach is going to tell me to do it, and that's why I'm going to do it. There's maybe that's a broken framework, I don't know, but they're competitive athletes, so okay, whatever, like they need that. But I'm not going to play that game for that's not my game personally, and it's not a responsible game for most general health people.
Yeah, and with that, because it's interesting when you mentioned there of, well, I should be doing this, and that kind of goes back to wanting to identify. So they become part of the CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting, whatever community it is, the running community. Oh, well, I should be having this, I should be having that. Whereas actually, I think sometimes they, because it is that once you scratch away at the surface, there is a little bit more of, well, actually, why do you actually want to get stronger? Well, actually, it'll give me a little bit more confidence. I'll be able to, carry myself a little bit more, give me the confidence in work, whatever it may be. I'll be able to play with my kids, grandkids, or there's always going to be a little bit more. But I think sometimes, do you think that rather than thinking, oh, well, I should have this, that from them goals that they've set there, even if they fell short, but they tick off all the other boxes, that actually they're kind of getting to that groove of, oh, well, actually, I'm just enjoying training. This is actually pretty cool. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling those progressing. I might have not hit those numbers that I set out to hit because, there's been plenty of times where I've mentioned, yeah, that would be a good number to hit. I didn't hit it, but I enjoyed the process up to it. And that didn't take anything away from it. I've still got really good memories of competitions, of being aware of coaching other people. Do you think sometimes that's sort of the benefit of training, and can be kind of that spark to be like, actually, I don't need to identify with powerlifting, weightlifting, or CrossFit. I'm just Joe Bloggs doing training because this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I wouldn't even add anything to that except for a funny anecdote, I guess. Coach Kate Solovieva, Kate, sorry if I mispronounced her name. She goes by Solo. She had a funny post where it's like, do you want to fit into your favorite pair of jeans? Find your favorite pair of jeans, buy them in your size, and put them on. They fit. How many people are like, oh, I want to be able to play with my kids, but they haven't actually made the time, their grandkids. It's like, yeah, but you haven't seen your grandkids in 6 months because, you've been busy with things, or you haven't made the time. Like, as a coach, like one of the first questions I'll ask when I get sort of those generalized goals is, what would be the actual fastest way, like today, if I could get you within 24 hours an experience that brings you closer to your goal, and you got it, would you still train? And the answer most of the time is yes. And like there's this sense that, okay, maybe I need some physical activity. Maybe I enjoy the people at the gym. And nobody's going to like come to this like in a conversation, but I do think it's something that we end up coming to. I think it's weird that we try to come up with like, there has to be an excuse for physical activity. Like, I need some kind of big goal with a capital B, capital G, because we're born to move. Like, we are moving creatures. We enjoy movement. Like swinging out again at an obstacle course race this weekend as part of this festival, swinging, being on an obstacle course, like from monkey bars, and they had all sorts of different handles and things, brachiating. There's something for me really innately satisfying about that experience. And if somebody was to say, why do you love, doing that? I'd be like, I don't know. I'm human. Like, I'm me. Like, I can, and I enjoy being able to do that. And even if that were taken away from me, I'd find something else to do, but I'd be like, but I had a good memory there.
Yeah.
So I think you were dead on the money. And part of it is like, not making training this like, oh, I have to do this in order to achieve X. How about you just achieve X? And then we'll figure out why training is that important to you.
Yeah, I think from that, obviously, there's been quite a couple of touch points that we've spoken about there, and I know it might be a little bit different, or a different perspective, because there's lots of information on powerlifting, programming, technique, biomechanics, all those sorts of things. Whereas if you're I compete in powerlifting myself. I've competed in powerlifting for the last couple of years. I'm still training powerlifting now because I enjoy it. However, after the British last year, I did stop powerlifting for a little bit. Went back and played rugby. Why? I miss rugby. I wanted to go do rugby. I wanted to do something else. Because I didn't want that enjoyment of powerlifting to go away. That's always going to be there. There's always going to be things that you go back to. And when we're talking about movement and wanting to do things, it's that case of it's find what you're enjoying, give it a go. It doesn't have to be, I think everyone has that, especially we touched on it, I think at the start, about, being online, you can Google anything and you got access to see all these elite athletes. Whereas, one of the questions why I asked about, backgrounds, what got you involved in training, is because 9 times out of 10 people got involved. One of the first things that you mentioned, got involved in it because it was fun. I started doing this, and then you start doing other things. And it's kind of that case of, the elite level athletes in some shape or form will still enjoy what they do. However, how many, talking about, I'll just use rugby as an example because that's the other sport that I follow. They'll go play golf, they'll go do something else because, they've had their lifespan, if you like, of doing what they were doing. Obviously they got paid for it, or have competed at a high standard, but then they've done something else after that, which I think is, people forget that sometimes, where it's like, no, I need to do powerlifting, I need to try and be the best powerlifter that I can be. And it's kind of, you will progress, you will be better, a little bit like what you mentioned there about CrossFit. You did get better at certain things, but then also you've done an Ironman, you've done all the other things that you equally enjoyed and had that human movement.
Yeah, there's something. The most successful, at least the really successful athletes, at some point, it's not fun. In order to take first place on the podium, or even just get a podium placement, if there's enough people in the game, it's not fun. And the sport has to go from fun to fulfilling somehow. Like, it has to make that transition. For most people, quite frankly, their physical needs can be met by fun activity, or at least by activity that's fulfilling today. It's not even like a career fulfillment, or it's like, but literally like strength training. I've known some people who the gym experience was really oppressive to them. They just didn't like it, the music, the smell, whatever. They got a home gym and it's fun. It became fun all of a sudden, and vice versa. People are at a home gym and they're like, it's just me alone there. And I encourage them, I'm like, sign up at a local gym. Like, if you can't afford that and me, go to the gym, and like, we'll work this out later. And they're like, oh my God, like, it's fun again. It's I want to do this thing again. So we have this vision. There's like there's a term, the relationship escalator. There's an athletic escalator that, like, I guess if I've been doing this for 2 years, I'm pretty serious at it. So I need to treat like this, like it's a really serious thing. Why? You can play for 10 years if you want, as long as it's meeting your goals and serving you. And when you look at WHO health guidelines, 150 minutes plus of, general moderate physical activity and 2 days a week of resistance training gets you 70+% of the health benefit of physical activity. It's like, that's not hard to meet.
Yeah.
So unless you really dig being a high level athlete, unless like that pushing beyond fun is fulfilling. So it doesn't have to be fun to be fun, but unless that's fulfilling to you, then why push there? Yeah. Especially if that burnout then risks just you stop training. Yeah. Like, if you didn't do rugby and you're like, I'm going to power through this powerlifting thing and all those numbers that I didn't hit before, like, this is going to be my year. And then 6 months into it, you stopped training and you're like, I'm burned out. I'm going to take a month off. That becomes 2 months, and then 6 months. And then you look back a year later and what happened? That happened to me. I spent about 1.5 years off training after I started work, and then, the kid was coming up and there were some, like home issues that were like literally, I just taking care of people who were sick. And as I look back on it, I was training once a week during that window. And I look back at it, if I had just let go of the death grip, of strength training and had let it be fun and done things that were fun, I could have still done more. and been blessed by that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good point. And when you mentioned there about I should take this seriously right now. There's I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a meme where it's like, yeah, I benched 100 kilos, or I bought protein powder. I need to take things. I guess things are getting really serious now, and I always use that. But yeah, because the joke that I'll do with clients when I'm in the gym, probably about maybe 78% of the time laughing and joking in sessions. And then there's a certain part where, yes, when you get to a certain level of strength relative to that person, you do need to concentrate when you're squatting, because I don't want people injuring themselves. There are certain times where you just need to concentrate and be like, right, okay, I'll learn this. And then once the bar's down, or once you've finished the ski erg or whatever it is, then you can start. That's the community side of things. But it doesn't have to be really serious and be like, you have to walk in and just have a stern face on all the time, because I always think I want to look over. I always look and see, I've always fancied doing a strongman competition, because every time I look over and see people doing strongman, I'm like, that looks pretty cool. That looks I'd like to give that a go. And they look like they have fun doing it. Whereas if I looked over and people were frowning and scowling and just, no, you need to do this, that doesn't look very good, because then that way, again, on maybe a little bit of a tangent, that maybe puts more barriers of people getting involved in physical activity, as opposed to, well, that looks fun, I'm going to give that a go, do that for a little bit. And then you can still make progress. It's just, sometimes it might be, moving laterally to the side to then move forward in doing something else. If everything went up in a straight line, we'd all be deadlifting 500 kilos if it was that easy. But sometimes you've got to take a couple of different paths to where you get to get to where you want to be. Quite a lot of topics and a few tangents thrown in there. The last question that I like to ask, obviously, we've spoken about training, variety of training, mindset, identifying with, certain training modalities. But for everyone listening, whether it's clients or coaches listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Can't get away from self-reflection, from introspection. Like, you have to be in this for whatever you're in it for. As soon as it becomes about as soon as it becomes about, a vision that isn't aligned with your VIP, your values, identities, and priorities, the game's cooked. It's not sustainable, and eventually it'll fail. But once, or even if it's along the process, if you can align your practice with your VIP, whether that's as a coach or as a lifter, wherever you are, then that's something you can do for years. That's something you can enjoy. And 20 years back down, you can look and be like, I said yes every step along the way, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every minute of it.
I think that's a very good piece of take-home points and words of wisdom to finish on from there. Because I think a lot of people, you want to be able to look back, or even be able to look forward and think that you're still doing things and still enjoying it, rather than feeling, I wish I'd have done this, I wish I'd have done that. There's still opportunities to do that. Thanks a lot, CJ, for taking the time to jump on. Really enjoyed chatting with you today. If anyone's got any questions about what we've chatted about today, the work that you do with Barbell Logic, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Sure. Virtually any of the social media, so Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, CJ Gotcher. So that's just the easiest way to find me or reach out. And then if you're looking interested in what we're doing with the Barbell Academy, and maybe learning how to apply your VIP through strength to whatever your goal is, you can go to barbelllogic.com/academy, or our Facebook group, the Strength Coaches Learning Corner. So those are probably the easiest way to reach me and kind of find out what we're doing.
Awesome. Thanks again, CJ, for taking the time to jump on and chat. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.